Apparently, I found out this morning that I need 1,000 subscribers and 4,000 views, I think, before I can make any money off of my YouTube channel. So I'm not very worried about that. Definitely not profiting off of that. I think I've got 100 views, so only 3,900 more to go, and I think I have maybe 1 or 2 subscribers. So it's going to take me the rest of my career to get that up to 1,000. So I'm not too worried about that. So the big thing before we get onto your notes, which are great, by the way, you guys really knocked it out of the park on your observations. Before I get onto those, the one thing that if you didn't watch the videos from Friday's class, that I really want to stress is Daisy as the American dream, right? So this is really the whole novel is, and some of you guys got kind of close to this in some of your observations, but you never quite got all the way there. But what most people sort of read Gatsby as is one great big symbol. So Gatsby's pursuit of Daisy is not really about romance at all. It's really about pursuing the American dream and failing miserably at it because you can't achieve the American dream. And the American dream, the idea of the American dream comes from as far back as the Declaration of Independence, when they claimed, all men are created equal and all that sort of thing. So the idea is that they're getting away from this feudal sort of system that they would have had in Europe, and particularly in England, where you're a peasant and you're always going to be a peasant, and you have no prospects of ever not being a peasant. So the idea is supposed to be that in the United States, everyone has an opportunity to get rich and succeed. And that is a real, at best, it's stretching the truth quite a bit. Because what made Gatsby important, sort of historically, is that people read it and realized how stacked the system is in favor of the old money, right? The already wealthy. The system is stacked in their favor, and this is why Gatsby is still currently popular, because it seems like the ideas in there are just as important now as they ever were. And later on, I'm going to give you a couple of articles to read that compare some current things in the world with the Great Gatsby. It turns out that, and I can't say that I planned for this, but in recent weeks there have been some quotes from the Great Gatsby that have been trending on social media, and basically Tom Buchanan is Donald Trump, or Donald Trump is Tom Buchanan, either way. And there's a couple of really interesting articles about that were very well timed for our purposes. So I'll give you a chance to read those once we've covered your ideas up here. So if you spend some time sort of living with the idea that Daisy's not really a person at all, then she almost makes more sense. And I think the more that you think about this, the more that you realize, wow, all of the things that I didn't understand about her kind of suddenly make sense when you think about her as sort of the abstract notion of the American dream. Yeah, we'll see some of that. So we left off on Friday at you, Ruben, just because it happened to work out that way. So Gatsby's relationship with his father. Jimmy was bound to get ahead. He always had some resolves like this or something. Do you notice what he's got about improving his mind? He was always great for that. He told me I ate like a hog once and I beat him for it. During Chapter 9, the funeral, I could finally tell what distinguished Gatsby and Nick, besides money and personality. It is time for Turnley to bring you guys candy.
Are you guys learning stuff?
They're listening to stuff. It is not at all the same as learning stuff.
Still on the American Dream?
No, we're done with the American Dream. We're on Gatsby's relationship with his father.
Oh, so sad.
Yeah. So those of you who saw the video from Friday might have seen Turnley promise to bring you candy. So
only because it was caught on video.
Only because it was.
Otherwise, I wouldn't have brought any of you candy. So, candy? What kind do you like?
That is the only correct choice. Coffee Crisp is the only acceptable choice.
Candy? Candy? No, thank you. We've got a healthy person here. Disgusting.
She's got cavities, maybe.
All right. She's just too focused on Gatsby's relationship with his father. Candy? I may be giving people I know lots of candy.
I like how you're really, really hesitant about that.
Ruder's going to edit this out anyway.
I may or I may not. If I think that you look sufficiently foolish, I'll probably leave it in there just because
it's not at all a representation of a real university English class. No one gives you candy, and if they do, don't take it. Bye,
Miss Turnley. During Chapter 9, the funeral, I could finally tell what distinguished Gatsby and Nick besides money and personality. Their difference is one that had almost everything while the other had fewer resources. I made an assumption on how Nick describes Mr. Gats, a solemn old man, very helpless and dismayed, bundled up in a long, cheap ulster. Nick grew up with his father close to him, which defined his personality throughout the book. Excuse me. Gatsby's scenario was completely different. Gatsby grew up with his father. They were not close. It made Gatsby feel some pain or loneliness throughout his life, relying on Daisy's love and relationship for comfort and company to hide the pain, and besides Daisy, including at parties where he would be around all his friends, he felt alone. By saying this and looking from another perspective, Gatsby was a man in misery, but after all, he was a good man who made his father proud of what he had accomplished in life. As Nick says in the end, Gatsby turned out all right in the end. I was very disappointed with what happened to him in the end. He deserved more in his life. Okay, responses to that. I always thought it was very strange how Gatsby's father was in the novel at all. I always found like that felt like it didn't fit, and I think it helped to explain the name. We needed somebody from Gatsby's like real old life to come and sort of explain the rest of the story that we didn't know. And so I think he was necessary from that angle. But we see that Gatsby came from farther away from the wealth than Nick was. So Nick was kind of like lower upper class or upper middle class, maybe something like that. Gatsby came from well below that, and or J. Gats sounds a lot less aristocratic, doesn't it? And so part of the thing with the name is that this GATZ sounds very, I don't know, maybe Eastern European or something, Hungarian or Polish or something. And it definitely doesn't sound British, whereas Gatsby sounds sort of vaguely British. And when you combine that with him saying that he's an Oxford man from the famous British university, then we get more of the sense of it's not just the money that he's trying to present. He's trying to present that notion of old wealth, that status, right? And so in America, it is possible, however extremely unlikely, that you can go from rags to riches. You can get rich if you work hard enough, if you're lucky enough, and if you work hard enough and you're exceptionally gifted, maybe. But even if you can get the wealth, you can still never get the status. And that's that's what kept Gatsby apart from Daisy, is that he could never have the status. Okay, Taylor on the color green. The green light appears many times throughout the novel, symbolizing Gatsby's hopes and dreams. He intentionally chose a house in the direction of seeing the green light at the end of Daisy's dock. He enjoyed this because it reminded him and gave him hope of reviving his past. Michaelis wasn't even sure of its color. He told the first policeman that it was a green light. Typically, green symbolizes wealth and growth, but it can also represent death and greed. And we can say the same thing about yellow and gold, right? It quite often represents wealth, but it can also represent death. And this is a notion that actually goes back as far as Greek mythology even. So the Greek god Pluto, the god of the underworld, because wealth, especially mineral wealth, comes from the ground, he was associated with the dead and with wealth. So those two things kind of went together, and there's been a sense in which they have gone together ever since. When Michaelis described Myrtle's death, he explained that the light was green. The light was green, Daisy drove and killed Myrtle. I think that represents that Gatsby didn't accomplish his goal of marrying Daisy. I think the color green also represents Gatsby becoming wealthy in the end to try and gain Daisy back. Lastly, I think the color green represents Daisy's personality, needy, selfish, and money-oriented. Colors are, they have built-in associations, all colors do. And so it's a really easy way for writers to add extra layers of meaning by being very intentional about what colors they use. Okay, Kaylee on a conversation between George and Myrtle. I told her she might fool me, but she couldn't fool God. After Myrtle died, George was talking about a previous conversation that he and Myrtle had before she died. In his statement, he reveals that he knows about her affair. This might change what Mr. Wilson as a character represents. Earlier on, we thought of him to be a character who represents an average person who is oblivious to certain things going on around him. However, now that we know Wilson actually does know more than we thought, we might not be able to consider him to be just average. Now, this is good, but this is a start. It doesn't quite go as far as I would with this. So, if we're looking at the novel as a giant symbol, which I'm suggesting is a really helpful way to look at it, and we've already discussed that George kind of represents the common man, if the common man knows that he's getting, cheated on symbolically or otherwise, but what does it mean that he doesn't do anything about it? Hey, come on in. I think it's important to recognize that it's not that he doesn't know. The rich people think that he's stupid, and he maybe isn't all that stupid, but there's nothing that he can do about it. And so when you think back to those scenes with Tom, maybe someday, if he feels like it, going to sell a car to George, right? All those scenes where Tom is kind of bullying George. If you think back and revisit that scene thinking that George knows what Tom is doing with his wife, and there's still nothing he can do about it. He still needs the rich person to help him if he feels like it. Right? And that is the strongest statement on the sort of the common man, the lower class man. That is the strongest statement that Kaylee could have made, and she almost does. From Anna, the reason that he pursued Daisy so desperately, he being Gatsby, obviously, he knew Daisy was extraordinary, but he didn't realize just how extraordinary a nice girl could be. She vanished into her rich house, into her rich, full life, leaving Gatsby nothing. He felt married to her, that's all. Gatsby's obsession with Daisy mainly has to do with what she represents to him rather than her as a person. As we have talked about before in class, she is a shallow person. See, Anna gets close to it here. She gets close to it, doesn't quite get it. Why would anyone pursue someone so shallow and selfish? And isn't that what capitalism is? We all pursue it anyways. Perhaps his view of extraordinary is money and riches. He once described Daisy's voice as sounding like money, a comment which makes a lot more sense now. Daisy to him represents what he couldn't have before. Now that he has money, he meets the requirements, or he believed. And of course we know that he has the money, but money doesn't make you classy. Right? He also has an obsession with his past, wanting to reclaim what he had with her in the past. So really close here to hitting the nail on the head. On Meyer Wolfsheim, this guy's an interesting character, and you'll notice that I asked a bunch of questions about him on the quiz. The first time we met Wolfsheim in a bar, I thought that he was a very interesting person. The fact that he was illegally selling liquor and the point made about his cufflinks made me think that he was in some way a scary person. Certainly not someone that has human molars as cufflinks would be someone I would look forward to sitting down and having a conversation with. When Nick was trying to find people to come to the funeral, Wolfsheim was the only one that really showed any interest in it at all. Even though he didn't show up in the end, he still sent a letter which made me think that he actually had a strong bond with Gatsby as well as a good relationship. In the letter he says, I cannot get mixed up in this thing now. There are 2 points I'd like to make about this statement. The first being that there is almost nothing to get mixed up in. You can see that by the fact that there are 2 people at his funeral, and I'm sure that if he were to come, there would be no fuss. The second point takes me back to his dirty money and how he got it. The only way I can make sense of anything that he could get mixed up in is how he is worried about being seen and reported as a criminal and would get in trouble for doing what he did to make so much money. Later on, when Nick goes to see him, he states, "Let us learn to show our friendship for a man when he is alive and not after he is dead." I think this is a very bold thing to say because I understand how there are always people that come to someone's funeral just because their mom was his third cousin, and most people occupying the seats would not know the man's favorite color, so maybe he doesn't want to be accused of that. Okay. Reactions to that? I think that the casual sort of racism that exists in this book extends not only to black people but also to Jewish people, and you see some it almost seems like foreshadowing of the Second World War, even though the book was written well before that. You see some Tom making references to some pseudo-scientists on the latest sort of leading edge research into racial profiles and that sort of thing. And this is something we identify with Germany in the 1930s, but certainly it was, the ideas were being passed around here just as much as they were in Nazi Germany. Okay, Abby on Gatsby's fatal weakness. What brought Gatsby down was the fact that he was unable to realize that Daisy was her own person and that she had changed. There are several times when he acts very controlling towards her, saying that he knows what she wants, most notably when he tells Tom the truth of their affair and that she never loved him. He never actually asks Daisy what she wants because he thinks he already knows. Gatsby is unable to accept that things and people can change, and for the worse. He's not in love with her, he's in love with his memory of her from 5 years ago, or just what she represents. It is if the first time he had met Daisy was during the events of the book, I highly doubt he would have thought much of her. Nick makes note of this several times during the book, most notably when Gatsby reacts to Nick's comment on being unable to bring back the past with complete denial. Gatsby, so what Abby is referencing here is what Nick said something like, "You can't relive the past," and Gatsby says, "Oh, old sport, of course you can," which is a sort of a confusing comment, but it lets us know something that we need to about Gatsby's mental state, I suppose. Gatsby thought that Daisy would just start loving him again, leave Tom, and run off into the sunset with him and live happily ever after. Unfortunately, people aren't that simple, and real life doesn't work that way, and Gatsby didn't understand that. Can we... so what is Abby saying here? What is it that is Gatsby's weakness? Yeah. I think that... I think that's one possible answer. I'm not sure that that's what Abby is saying here. An inability to accept change, maybe? Emily?
If it's like going into the American dream, Gatsby being unable to understand why he hasn't achieved the American dream yet, if he feels like he's followed it correctly, like, doesn't understand why he hasn't achieved it because it seems like he should have.
Right, and isn't that just poetically perfect? Right, he did all the things he was supposed to do, and he still can't have what, you know, the American dream is supposed to be giving him. People have commented that Gatsby's flaw is that he is too romantic. I'm not sure that I agree with that. I think to an extent that case can be made, but I think that is that's oversimplifying the major themes of the novel, maybe to say that. Okay, so that is our last comment, I think.